Okay, so we didn't get to this second array exercise last night, so I thought I'd show it to you today. So in practice class, add a non-static method called getWords. GetWords should take a sentence and break it apart into an individual array of words, print those words on individual lines, and then rejoin the words into a sentence, but with a plus sign between the words instead of a space, and then print the plus up version of the sentence. This sounds really hard, and it would be, except that there's some nice Java libraries to help us with this. So, since it's a non-static method, of course I have to create an object. Let's go through this syntax one more time. This is the declaration of an object reference variable, or an object handle. Data type comes first in Java when you're declaring a variable, and then your identifier for it. You're free to think of your own name. So that declares our instance of an object handle of the practice data type. It's set to new. This is going, new announces a claim of heap memory. What does new need? It needs the template that is going to become the stamp for that memory section. So anything that's in practice in terms of data would be part of that template, and then allocated at the time. And then it returns a reference to that object here. And P is the reference to that object. And now we can use the object, p.getWords, which is what our assignment is. I changed it a little bit. Okay, so now I have a hard-coded string in here. Declare the string variable. Again, see that pattern. Declare the variable. That's a data type that we didn't create. It was created in the Java standard library. But here's our name for it. But it follows the same pattern for data types that we create. Practice is a data type. All right, so it's set to this string. And now we have the split method, and that does the split the string into an array of words. Okay, so on spaces. So this is a delimiter. So if I had commas between the words, then I'd put a comma here, or a tab character. So the delimiter can be specified inside the parameter for the split method. S, the string method. So string's an object. It has a method called split, and it will split apart the strings at spaces. Now it's going to return the values, and it returns the values in terms of an array, because one string contains many words. So that's expressed by an array of strings. Compare and contrast the declaration of an individual string versus the declaration of an array of strings, which is what string.split works. By the way, split is very common. All programming languages have some library method to support what split does. Okay? So we're going to go now and iterate through the array. This would be the same thing of any array. This happens to be an array of strings. So words.length, a property in the array to tell us how big it is. Notice the pattern here, very important. We start counting at 0, and this is always less than length, right? If I have 10 words, I stop counting at 9 because I started counting at 0. If I do less than or equal to length, then I'd blow up past the end of the array. All right, this is the use of the array element. So notice there's an index there. So whenever you're dealing with an array and you want to now get to one particular item in that array, then you use the brackets again, and you put the variable that's the index into the array inside those brackets. So all of the words in the array, a single word in the array, you need to use an index. So this index is going to be looping up 0 to up to the length of the string, and in increment I++. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and with every one of those it'll print the individual word that's stored in there. Okay. Now I've split. There's also join. Again, very common in all computer programming languages, this idea of split join. Okay? So, in the string class, there's helper methods. Pretty common pattern. This is a static method. How do I know that? Well, for one thing, Eclipse puts it in italics. But if it didn't do that, I'd still know it was a static method because I'm using a class name to access it. If you use an object name to access it, it's probably not a static method, it's probably an object method, right? Helper methods are often static methods. Often. Because it says, okay, string, what's a common thing people want to do in string? Join them, right? So take string array here and join it. Now, the opposite is happening. So this join needs actually two parameters for information. What's going to come between the words, the delimiter, and then the array of strings that's the input format. Okay? So now we see the output of this. Here's the individual words coming out from line 11 here. Okay. And those are the individual words that it finds here based on the split of spaces. And then when I join them again, it uses this as the delimiter between, and now it adds this. Okay? And we print this single string out, and that's what prints out here. All right, I'm going to pause the recording of the video and make a few modifications to this, so we'll come back and look at my modifications. All right, so how have I modified the function? I've removed the local variable string s that was there before. And instead, I've taken that local variable, remember how it was declared, string s equals a string, and now it's a parameter, information into the function. So how does that change how it's used? Since it's now defined as having a parameter, the caller must specify the string. Notice you don't data type it again, you just give it a data type that matches the required parameter. Now look how much more flexible this function is. Instead of having, this is the previous run of it, instead of having just one string that it can do any string and do this useful activity to it. I'll just run it straight out, and we'll see the result here. So the first one, now is the time for etc., and then join together, and then that. Okay? Power of parameters. I've added information into this, and now I can pass it any string I want and have it do this magic activity to it. I'll come back. I'm going to pause it again, make one more change, and then we'll come back and look at that change as well. Okay, let's review the modifications I've made to GetWords now. So I still have my parameter, but I've removed any kind of string output from GetWords, so it's not saying anything now to the user. And that's the way library methods, by the way, should work. They take information in, we have a parameter, information in, and they do some work, and then they either silently return or return with information. That's my second modification to GetWords. I removed all the user interface aspects to it, no longer prints anything out, and I'm returning the information instead. So I've changed void to string. That's the data type of the function. We haven't done this yet. So the data type of the function is string. Notice this is same as declaring a variable. The data type comes first, and then your name for the variable. Here, the data type comes first. Before it was void, saying no data type. Now, GetWords, the name of the function. So data type here, GetWords, now the string of the function. Notice now all put together, it's returning a string, and it's taking a string in as a parameter. Those two aren't tied together, though. That's just this example. You could take an integer in as a parameter and return a string, or vice versa. Those two things are not related to one another. We've promised to return a string, however. Now, what we must do as programmer, notice I'll comment out this return string here, and I'll get an error. And it will say, you promised to return a string, and you're not doing it, right? Because I commented out that. So now, to re-fulfill my promise, I'm returning a string now. The compiler is happy with me. I promised to return a string. It must hit a return statement. The function must hit a return statement with that string information. It's returning information to the caller via that mechanism, the return mechanism. Information in, this function works on the data, and the information then comes back out as the return type. Let's look at the caller. Now, I haven't changed the caller at all, right? So it's going to do GetWords, GetWords. What do we expect in the output here? Let's right-click here, and we can clear. That we did clear. Yeah, clear the output window. So we'll run it again. And what do we expect to see? Well, there's no output here, right? So it will silently do its work and terminate. And there we go. Okay. So right now, this is the user of this is ignoring the return value. It's throwing it away. That's perfectly fine in the language. You don't have to pay attention to return type, but it's there for us to capture if we want to. So I'm going to capture it and then print it out. I could print it out directly, but capture it into a variable. Remember, getWords returns a string, and now we are capturing its value, whereas before we were ignoring it. Print it out. And then we'll set S to getWords2 and print it out again. And now when we run it, cancel, hold on. I'm going to pause the video, fix my error, and then come back. I see it right away. I typoed the parameter name. All right, so we've capturing it now. I'm reusing that parameter again, or using this local variable again, and replacing it, and then printing it out again. And we can see there's our result. Information in, a normal English reading string, and the string with all the basically with the spaces replaced by a plus, thanks to split on the individual string object, and then join, the static method of the helper method of the class string, to rejoin the words using pluses in the delimiter and the input of an array of strings. All right, so think about parameters and think about return types. We've seen them both in standard libraries. And notice, by the way, now we're fully able to understand what's happening in main. Public, publicly visible. Static, fixed. Void, returns nothing. Main, lowercase. Entry by conventional standards, the entry point to our program. Parameter list, right? We wrote one of those. We just did, right? Give me a single string. This is a parameter list in domain. An array of strings called args. So that's actually command line parameters. So you type in the name of the program, and then you type in command line parameters. The user types in more instructions to the program. The program gets that information via the array of string arguments. We'll look at that next week. All right. Thanks for paying attention. There's a lot of important stuff, I think, in this lecture. All right. See you later.